Are you struggling to find mental health clinicians to work for your group, practice, or agency? Tired of posting job ads for your open roles only to have no response? Or worse, have the wrong individual apply for the role? What if you had a partner who understood both the intricate requirements and career arc of a mental health clinician and how to recruit them more efficiently to work for your organization? Sparrow Search Services is a behavioral health focused recruiting firm that utilizes their staff expertise as practicing mental health clinicians to source and engage other mental health clinicians who may be open to making a career upgrade. Reach out to Sparrow today via their website, sparrowsearchservices.com, to see how they can help you. Mention keyword Joe in your message to receive $500 off your first placement. Again, that's sparrowsearchservices.com and use promo code Joe to get that discount. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 910. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and we cover all sorts of things on this podcast. If you are brand new to the show, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. As you heard, this is our 910th episode, so you have 909 to listen to for some awesome content around starting, growing, scaling a private practice, building that private practice of your dreams that's thriving and doing what you want it to do for your bottom line, for your community, for the kind of clinical work you want to do. We cover things in business, in the clinical world, and even outside of it. Sometimes I just follow my own curiosity and find really interesting guests that I think are maybe loosely connected or maybe just interesting that I bring on the show. In fact, earlier in the year, I interviewed my cousin, Matt Carrier, who works for NASA, and he's doing all of this really interesting research around nuclear fusion. And I was texting him one day and just said, you know what? This is really interesting. I'm going to have you on the podcast because this is something that's happening in the world and I want to bring you on. But today we're going a little bit more clinical, but we're going to hit some business stuff as well. We have Maira Holzmann, who is an LCSW that passionately works at the intersection of being a seasoned therapist running a thriving group practice and a business coach for soul-aligned therapists who want to thrive more in their private practices. With her extensive training in empowered somatics, healing trauma, and nurturing resilience, she's dedicated to helping psychotherapists create a successful, soul-aligned private practice that allows them to charge premium fees for their services and do good and live large. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast today.
Hi, Joe. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have someone on the show that is doing both the clinical work, running a group, and doing the consulting work. But let's just start with your clinical work. How did you get into somatic work? How did you get into the kind of work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I got into somatic work a really long time ago. I had a colleague, we went to graduate school together, and after graduate school, we stayed in touch. I was working in severe and chronically mentally ill, and then I transitioned to working with population of clients who struggle with eating disorders. And in that journey, I was going through my own personal growth journey. And one of my friends told me to check out Peter Levine's somatic experiencing training. And I hadn't heard anything about somatics at all. Everything I had learned in graduate school was, top down, a lot of theoretical, and then, of course, practice. But somatics was not as big of a deal then as it was today. And so I started taking the somatic experiencing training back in, I think I did my first beginning module in 2007. And I completed that 3-year training program. And from there, I met all kinds of different teachers who offered different things, which led me to what I'm doing now, which is called co-regulating touch, which is a therapeutic touch form to support the healing from early trauma. So it was this basically this journey that I've been on, and all of it made sense given my own background and how much somatics has helped me heal from my own early trauma. So that's how it began.
Mm.
And now I'm running a practice where all we do is somatic based approaches. Of course, we use top down approaches, but the name of my business is called Somatic Therapy Partners. So we're really clear about what we what we do at our practice, which is using somatic approaches to help clients heal.
Yeah, I love when people do work that they've personally done as well. I think there's something really powerful about saying, I've been through some tough stuff and this work has personally helped me, as well as, I help clients in that work as well.
Agreed.
For for you personally, and disclose whatever you feel like disclosing it, or don't disclose whatever you feel like not disclosing. But like for you personally, how has somatic work just helped you in life, in your relationships, in just how you feel grounded in the world, or like what has it done for you personally?
Yeah, I it brings to mind this memory of me being at a dinner party, and this was early in my training. I was in California, and I was trying to start a private practice, and I was sitting at a dinner party with friends of mine, and I only knew the two people who were hosting the dinner party. And as the dinner party went on, I realized that I was not part of the conversation, and I started having a lot of negative self-talk. And because I was in this somatic training, I was noticing the negative self-talk, like, oh, you can't keep up, you're not that, you're not as smart as these other folks at the table, etc. But what I really noticed was that my body was beginning to clench and it was beginning to tighten. And I was like, well, great. I'm in a somatic training. And I started doing some grounding practices and some breathing things. And I just started noticing how my body was starting to shift. And as my body was beginning to down regulate and settle back down in my chair, my thoughts about who I was and who I wasn't, and my thoughts about worth started to kind of evaporate almost immediately, which I found utterly remarkable because it wasn't like I hadn't attended parties before and felt unworthy or felt like I wasn't smart enough or something like that. And I was sitting at the head of the table. And as I was doing these grounding practices, I could start to engage more socially. Like I started laughing at the jokes, and it just sort of unfolded from there. And so it was this little experience of taking the things I had just been learning in the training that day, applying it to what was happening in my body, which was a bunch of constriction and tension. Because if the mind and body are one, which they are, if my mind is saying things like, oh, you're not worthy enough to be here, then my body's going to clench, right? And if I can
Mm,
unclench my body, then what that's going to do is change the narrative in my head. And that's exactly what happened. And from there, I just kept following all of the breadcrumbs leading me to doing therapeutic touch work because as it turned out, I struggle with the impacts of early trauma. I knew that I'd grown up with parents that were really hard on me. And, my parents were immigrants, so I'm first generation, and Filipino culture with children is very different than American culture. And when I started taking these trainings in therapeutic touch work and somatic resilience and regulation, which is more of a specialty within somatics, everything started to make sense about how I was and why I was. And then the work just sort of catapulted me personally and professionally into places I didn't ever know I could get to. And, personally, what that means is feeling more regulated, which, from my view of things, both personally and professionally, when someone has the gift of regulation in their nervous system embodied and embedded, then they have access to the whole world. And what I mean by that is you can take more risks, you can have richer relationships, you can, have more joy. So there's all that.
mm. No, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that example. And
Yeah.
it's interesting how, just a social situation triggered, this inside of you. I mean, I can totally picture myself being like, oh, like I feel like I'm in fourth grade when I'm being left out, and all these things. And it's
Exactly.
like, but really, like people are just having conversations, and that's just how like the seating ended up, and it like, but it wasn't personalized. And
That's
um,
right.
you know, for some of us, if not a lot of us, we learned about specific techniques in graduate school, and maybe we've dipped our toes in here and there. We might have read books like The Body Keeps the Score, or
Yep.
just we have a armchair knowledge of what somatic work is. And then in any field in psychology or therapy, there's people that specialize deeper and deeper and deeper in a certain area. Could you just give us a quick master class on somatic work? Like, what is it? What are some of the basics people should know? And I know that that is a huge thing to ask of you, being that we have like, probably 5 to 10 minutes for you to do that portion of the interview. But it's like, what's the quick and dirty version of like, what is somatic work? What should people know?
Yeah.
And then I have a few follow up questions from that, but just so that those that are listening have a really just, okay, like I remember that from grad school, or, oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
maybe something I haven't labeled as somatic, but it is. What's the quick masterclass on somatic work?
All right. Great question. Here's the quick masterclass on somatic psychotherapy. So, somatic psychotherapy basically involve basically uses the body as an ally in the healing process. A lot of psychotherapy is built on top down, meaning you do a lot of changing in your thinking and you're looking at how your thinking is impacting your life and how it might get in the way. Well, in somatics, we're also listening to the body because the body expresses itself far different from the mind. The mind uses thoughts, it uses stories, narratives, all of that kind of stuff. And when we're listening to the body and incorporating it as part of the healing process, we are paying attention to sensations and the way that our physiology changes based on what we're talking about. We're paying attention to breath work, or not breath work, but how our breath is doing. And basically, what we're trying to do is bring our nervous system into that balance where the sympathetic arousal system and the parasympathetic settling system are both being used in equal measure, because when trauma happens, usually one part of the nervous system starts to dominate, right? So if you're stuck in sympathetic arousal, then you struggle with a lot of anxiety, fight, flight, PTSD kinds of symptoms. And then on the other side of that is the parasympathetic system, which if your system gets stuck in that, feels like depression, apathy, lethargy. And so one of the big things that I do is I'm observing my clients a lot, and I do this thing where I feel into the client's system. So it's kind of like sending my attention into the body and sort of noticing what happens in my own body and then bringing it into the room so that the clients can start to check out, well, what is happening in my body and how might this be contributing to the overall pattern that's keeping me stuck? Because if you're in a survival pattern all the time, in the most basic sense, your body is constricted. Your fascia is tight, your organs are bound up, you're not breathing as well. And so a lot of somatics is in the initial phases is just bringing that awareness to that client so that they can learn that they can do something different by tuning into their body, which is then going to change their experience so that hopefully they can move out of that survival pattern and come into more choice oriented actions and decisions. Does that all make sense?
Mm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about what would be some either symptoms or experience people are having, unpleasant feelings, any of those things that would trigger, oh, this is an opportunity to do some somatic work, and then maybe share with us a handful of things that would help in regards to doing from a somatic perspective,
Yeah.
something to get back to baseline. And I get that, like, this isn't therapy, of course, like, if people need deep work, like, work with a
Right.
therapist. But, what are some of those things that, like, anybody could benefit from? And what would be kind of some of the triggering events, feelings, or things going on in the body that would kind of like be before that?
Yeah. So one of the things I give to clients as one of the first things to track in terms of feeling triggered is a sense of constriction. Typically what I'm seeing in my clients is their shoulders are up by their ears, they're barely breathing, or if they are breathing, it's not very rhythmic or smooth, and they're usually clenching some part of their body. They look kind of unnaturally still. And any event can trigger that kind of experience. It can be that withering look that you got from your boss, or it can be the fight that you got into with your partner the night before. And things don't get resolved if we're just, in my experience anyway, if we're just thinking about things. Sometimes we have to think about things to come up with a solution. So if what the body naturally does when it's triggered for most people is come into a state of constriction, then one of the things that I teach clients right off the bat is, as a portal into their body, is can we just start to look for pleasant enough sensations, right? So in a first session, typically at the end of the session, or somewhere during the session, but I'll say, like, how's this session going so far? What are you liking about what's happening? And it's a very specific question. It's not like, how are things going? It's like, what are you liking about this session? Oh, well, I'm really appreciating that I'm feeling gotten right now. And then I'll say something like, okay, so can you just notice that thought? I'm feeling really gotten in this session. And then I want you to notice how your body might be starting to change as you linger your attention in that thought. And the minute that a client starts to experience their body beginning to settle, or they can breathe, or they can suddenly give me eye contact, whereas maybe at the beginning of the session they weren't, they start to understand that these little changes are moving them out of the pattern that has kept them stuck and got them to my office in the first place. So, my first piece of homework that I give to all clients is every day at the end of the day, or if you think of it in the middle of the day, can you just look for one pleasant enough experience, right? So, if you do this at the end of the day and you review your day, maybe it was the worst day of your life. And as you were driving home, you saw a beautiful sunset. Or it doesn't have to be anything super big or super noble. It can be like, yeah, my daughter drew a picture for me and it made me feel really good because it said daddy's number one. And then I ask them to just notice how that experience feels in their body, because I'm asking them to look for this pleasant experience. Part of the pattern that happens when a client is traumatized is their brain is almost even more automatically wired. I call it your brain getting sticky, looking for all of the things that could go wrong, right? In our field, we call that hypervigilance. And
Mm.
clients don't know that they're hypervigilant, that they're constantly tracking, like, like I was at that dinner party, like, am I fitting in? Is this okay? Am I laughing enough? And, it was like all this weird, just really intense criticism. And when clients learn that they can experience their bodies in a pleasant way, it opens the door for them to want to become more embodied. Because for most clients who have experienced trauma, coming into the body is the last place they want to come into. So that little piece of homework that endures throughout our work together of looking for pleasant enough sensations is what I start with most clients.
And why is that? I think I know the answer, but why is that people avoid their body, especially when they've gone through trauma?
Yeah, I mean, the answer, because I've asked that question to clients. I'm like, so what is it about coming into the body that makes it so hard for you? And the number one answer I get 90% of the time is, if I come into my body and I start to feel what's happening, then I'm afraid I'm never going to stop feeling that. I'm always going to feel sad and
Mm.
depressed and rageful and sorrowful. And then I say to them, like, well, brilliant. Makes sense why you have spent all these years not coming into your body. Let's affirm that. Like, let's just affirm that as a coping mechanism, and let's just experiment, right? So in my sessions, I'm never telling my clients what to do. It's always an invitation, right? Because that's what we specialize in, is trauma, especially early trauma. So we don't want to be doing any kind of reenactment of someone who was, abusive or anything like that. And so it's always this invitation, like, oh, you want to notice how that feels when you tell me that you can, you feel comfortable sitting here, right? And it's just this sort of like easy flowing kind of experience. And when I say easy and flowing, I mean, that's the way that I'm trying to show up, so that they don't feel like they've got this pressure to come into their body. Because again, it's a war zone in there. It feels bad. And clients have learned to orient to their body in these ways where there's exploratory orienting versus defensive orienting. And most clients with trauma are doing defensive orienting, meaning when they check in with their body, they're automatically looking for what's wrong. And I'm coming in and going, hey, let's try this new habit. Let's look for what's good enough. Let's look for what's right enough. Okay, you're not crying right now. That's different. How is that to not be crying? Oh my God, it's such a relief, because this is the kind of thing that I thought I would never stop crying about. And it's like, right. So this is different. And then we do that, we do lots of different kinds of work, but awareness is always the beginning. And then the second piece that we do is a lot of nervous system education, right? I mean, clients have so much shame about these maladaptive ways that they've learned how to cope, whether it's drug use or spending money or shutting down or whatever it might be. And over time, they start to learn, like, this was the best thing that you could have done given the situation that you are in. And it starts to almost automatically decrease their shame, because they see the value, even though they know it's not good to be using, drinking a lot or whatever it might be. They see the value of why their nervous system came up with this way of coping. So those two things together,
Mm.
education on the nervous system and then helping them learn how to come in their body in a pleasant enough way, will eventually lead to a sense of a safe embodiment, meaning that they can feel safe coming into their body because they know how to come into their body in these very specific ways, and they practice doing that.
Mm. So awesome.
Yeah.
As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Well, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about starting a group practice. And so, uh, when did you realize I want to have a group practice?
I really, really appreciate this question. So I'm chuckling because I don't know, honestly, if I know now, like knowing what I know now, having run my group practice for 3 years, if I would have made the same decision because it's so much work. It's very gratifying and very much a personal growth piece, but it's also a lot of effort and a lot of will. So that's why I was chuckling. Um, Basically, what happened is I got full in my solo practice, and I was like, it'd be really cool to work with people. It'd be really cool to have someone, help me do the things that I don't want to do or that I'm not that great at. And so it just sort of followed what I call the natural order of my business. I got so full, I was turning clients away left and right. And I was also working in an incredible amount of hours, like probably like 40 to 60 hours, not clinical hours, but to run my business and take the calls and do the marketing and everything. And so I started my practice right before the pandemic hit. And we've been
Wow.
growing ever since. Yeah, I know. I was like, wow, this is really interesting that this is the timing of me starting I opened up the group practice in February of 2020, and then COVID hit March. So that was the beginning of my business.
Oh man, I love those stories. I mean, it's so funny because I had my oldest daughter assessed for some reading things, and we had this intervention, and they had never done online. It had always been people that would like be in Chicago, and we live in Michigan, and it was like they they said, well, we don't know what we're doing this online. We don't know if it'll have the same results, and it was this whole like applied behavior analysis approach to like tutoring that was
Yeah.
amazing. My daughter went up like 3 grade levels in 18 months.
Wow.
Um, but, then, they had tested it all out with my daughter, and, like, a month later, they had to switch everybody in their business to online, and
Yeah.
luckily, they had just, had my daughter as a test case. So they were able to, do that rather quickly.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about your group practice, and through that lens as a group practice owner, what do you wish you had known, or planned for, or set up right from the beginning that maybe later on you added in, or you're like, man, I should have done that right at the beginning instead of waiting, this long? Or like, are there any, I don't want to call them regrets, but just like things you learned as you went that you probably should have done earlier on in the process?
Yeah. So the first person that I hired was someone that I knew from work. We used to work together at an agency previously, and she is the kind of she's my clinical lead now. She's the kind of clinician and person that is very self-reliant and self-sustaining. So when she came on, apart from the training that I gave, she knew how to do everything, and it was just a matter of learning different systems. So what I wish I had known, because it would have just saved me so much stress and tears, honestly, is that hiring requires planning. Like, I can't tell you, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I put out all these ads and, a few people answered. And I said no to a lot of people because I thought I was going to get this kind of person, someone who was like between 5 and 7 years in their career and wanting to come and work at a place that, specialized in somatic therapy. And I basically got bit in the butt by not having a plan in terms of like an interviewing process, an onboarding process, and a training process. And it didn't set up the second
Mm.
clinician that I hired ended up not being set up for success because I didn't know to do that. I'm the kind of person that, admittedly, and I say this to people pretty openly, I have a big ego and I tend to be pretty impulsive. So my big ego was like, we'll find the right people and we just need to do this. And, like I always think I know more than I do. That's one of my big Achilles heels. And, so what I
And a
had to learn.
superpower because you probably, like, proceed into areas without, like, second guessing yourself. I mean,
That's
I
true.
think that's also probably a superpower at times.
It is. Thank you for saying that. I mean, there is a blessing to I call it being overconfident. And then there's a curse, which is like, oops, we had this clinician that didn't quite work out because I didn't, and I take full responsibility for that, not in a blaming or self deprecating way, but it's like, oh, Myra, you're running a business and working with people. You cannot assume that they are just like you, that they know what to do, that they're ambitious, that they can figure it out, whatever it was. And so that would probably be one of the big that has been one of my steepest learning curves. One is to slow down and really think things through and not just launch the thing. And then two is when you hire and onboard people, you're not just, wanting people to come into the business to make money, but you are supported. To me, I'm a partner in their professional success and their professional development. And also, we want the people that come into my practice that work with us to be really part of our team. I mean, we have a very clear culture. Our value system is very well set up, and we make decisions based on those values consistently. And that's been one of the big learnings for me in terms of having a solo line practice is, what's my mission, what's my vision, and what are the values? Some of the basics of business, right? The MVV. And it took me a little while to figure that out because I think I was so stuck up in my ego that I was like, I'm going to be successful and I'm just going to do it and it's going to happen. But actually, it requires forethought and planning and, a lot of discernment. I mean, you know how many values there are out in the world? And then I just chose five, and those five are the guardrails for everything we do. And I'm really proud of that piece. The hiring piece, now we have a whole system set up, onboarding, training, hiring, interview questions, the whole flow and everything. And that feels also really good. That's what came out of, learning things the hard way.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think it really points to just how much, having that early community of people to help you with launching your private practice or your group practice. And, there's so many people that have done this before that, and I know you do coaching also,
Yeah.
that, when you work with a professional in some capacity, it helps speed things up. I did want to note, just because of the timing, that when this is live this week, our memberships are open. So Next Level Practice for solo practice owners, that is open this week. It closes later on in this week. So make sure if you have a solo practice that you jump into that membership. And Group Practice Launch, that's our 6-month program taking you from a solo to a group practice. So you're going to want to grab a spot there. It's going to close at the end of this week. And then Group Practice Boss, our membership program for people that have group practices, that's also open as well. So you can read all about that over at practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. Membership or memberships? Try them both. We'll make sure they both redirect to the right one. I actually don't think at the time of this recording that page is even built. So my team's going to be like, what's /membership? Like, what is that? But we're going to
Exactly.
make it easy on people. We'll do membership and memberships just because I don't know which one they're going to land on. So awesome. Well, I want to talk, in the last little bit here about you entering into the coaching world. And
Yeah.
so like, how'd you decide that? Who's your ideal client? Like, what have you found to be helpful and difficult in that space? Like, just tell us about business coaching and how that's going.
So, honestly, I'm new to the business coaching world and I'm excited to explore. So, where I think that I would do my best work is for those clinicians who are in that transition from wanting to do solo practice and coming into a group practice, or they're wanting to up level their solo practice. And part of the whole reason why I decided to, enter into coaching and explore this aspect of being of service is because I just kept watching myself make 1,000 mistakes. And I had business coaches. I even had a business coach tell me lovingly, she said, Myra, you're really hard to coach because you just think you know it all. And I was like, shoot. Like I was like mildly embarrassed, but it was also true. And as soon as she said that, I was like, yeah, because, I feel like there are so many clinicians out there who want to do great things in the world. And I mean, I think at this point, maybe everybody knows that it's not that simple to just set up a practice. And there are some people that it is really simple. And what the thing I really want to bring into the world as a business coach for therapists is this whole idea of soul alignment. And this comes directly from a lot of my mistakes were made because my ego was driving the bus. My ego was, looking for the status of how much I could charge, how many clients I had, the wait list, like all of the sort of what I call sort of ego status things that I think therapists can be, that are generally proud of and look forward to is being able to charge what you want and that kind of thing. And what I realized is that when my ego was driving the bus of my business, what happened was I got burnt out. Right. And there's also like deeper underpinnings. This is part of the, soul alignment thing is like, I also want to support clinicians in exploring, well, what is it that drives you to burnout? Because I had, one of the things I tell clients that I work with is I have this story, as I think so many of us do, that it has to be me. I have to be the one to execute and do everything. And that is part of what led me to coming into burnout. So if we go back to the part where I started group practice right before COVID hit, I was actually really thankful for COVID to hit, not for COVID to hit, but more because everything shut down. And I had this reason, this like lived, societal reason why I could not go in and practice. And I took 6 weeks off. I needed
Hmm.
those 6 weeks to go from 28 to 30 client hours per week down to 4. And when I started paying attention to, oh, this is your cycle, Myra, like you just, because I call myself sympathetically dominant, meaning that like I tend to live in my arousal system more than I do my settling system. And so there's a lot of patterns that happen when we're running a business that can get in the way. And one was my ego, and two was also my nervous system pattern of being in an arousal state. And
Mm.
so, the way that I got grounded and the way that I came home to myself and allowed my practice to give me joy was by listening more to my soul and remembering that I was here for a purpose, not just my practice, but also to enjoy, live, be with my family, cultivate deep friendships. And everybody talks about the work life balance, but for me that work life balance was born out of my soul is withering right now. Like I'm working 60 hours a week and I have no joy in my life. And to me joy is one of the biggest emotional experiences that tells me that I'm in alignment with my soul's and my soul's expression. So that's kind of
Yeah.
how it started, is by making all these ego mistakes, so to speak.
I love that how honest you were about like your failures there, or your growth opportunities, or
Yes.
however we want to reframe it. Especially, I want to underline one thing you said, because I think it's so common. And with us working with so many private practices, I get to see these systemic patterns in the way that therapists think about their business. And that specific thing that you said that I think is so true for so many people is the idea of only I can do it, or I can do it best, or
Yes.
I should be doing it. And that may be true. You may be amazing at whatever the thing is. You may be amazing at lots of things. I'm good at a lot of things, and it's like, though, should that be where I spend my time? And to me,
Yes.
starting to think about, yeah, like I can do it, but should I do it? Is I think that question for people when they're going from that starting solo bootstrapping. Usually we don't have funders, or some hyper rich spouse that's like helping us with
Yeah.
this. Usually it's like, we're doing the best we can. We're like, oh my gosh, like $100 a month like into a website seems like so much. And all these little decisions of bootstrapping, where you are often wearing every hat. You didn't think you were going to be an SEO expert, but it's like, hey, it's way cheaper than paying $500 a month to learn how to do this myself.
That's
But
right.
then, like, that switch when you start to have a group practice, and then you start to scale a group practice, or even look into audience building, and going into building passive income, or all those other things, it's like, what's the single best use of my time? And so,
Yes.
even just like, today, it's all podcast interviews, consulting calls, and pre-consulting calls. And so it's like people that want to do one-on-one consulting with me, people that are already doing one-on-one consulting with me, or my podcast. And so today is packed full of the best use of my time. And there's still emails coming through. There's still things that need to get scheduled, but Jen's in my email figuring it out and getting things scheduled. And yeah, I could absolutely do that. But at the end of the day, I'm only going to have 5 emails I probably have to respond to, even though we get about 100 a day. And,
Yep.
and so it's like, that's where someone could probably even do it better than you with the right training, the right specialty. And that switch
Hmm.
is so hard for people when
God.
you've bootstrapped it. We all have our own money stories. We all have our own like self-worth stories, imposter syndrome,
Yes.
and you put all that in there, and it's like, I'll just do it, because then I don't have to like think about training somebody else or hiring someone else, when then it just burns us out.
Yes, exactly right. I appreciate you saying all of that. I mean, the other thing that helped me to be more soul aligned, and this is part of the last thing that I developed out of the mission, vision, and values was the vision. I could not figure out exactly what the vision of the world was that I wanted as a result of doing my business. And I remember I went on a mini retreat with myself for 3 days and was just, by myself doing whatever I wanted to do, focused towards business. And I was sitting in meditation and I realized that the whole reason for my business was to end intergenerational trauma, because I'm a child who experienced early trauma and then trauma throughout my relationship with my parents. And I have a daughter, and there was no way in hell that I was going to pass on the same ways of being that my parents did with me to my daughter. And when I really got in touch with that lived experience of wanting a different life for my daughter, wanting her to feel more safe in our relationships and have a voice in what was going on in her life, and all of the kinds of things where I didn't, basically I got a lot of misattunement growing up as well as abuse. And, that's going to happen as a parent. But when I got in touch with the reason for my business, the vision of it, it was like everything made sense. And then I could be like, oh, well, I've got to do this sort of work that I don't like to do because it contributes to this greater vision. It pushes the vision forward. And that gave me a lot more relief than just being like, oh my God, I hate my business. I feel like it's my mat, like I'm a slave to it and I just keep showing up for it. It's just started to change the way that I started to do things. And so that vision piece, along with identifying my own stories, money stories, as well as worth stories, were the things that helped me cut, and it's an ongoing process of every day. How do I step into joy with what I'm doing? And I know that sounds potentially cheesy. And sometimes I have to really work at it because what I'm doing feels like such a slog, and it has saved me. I mean, it really, I don't, I can honestly say that I haven't experienced burnout since, I don't know, since I figured out that this was my pattern, that I work, 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 and then I get burned out. It's like, okay, I can just slow everything down. And not, the other thing too is I don't have to be perfect about things. It's like, you know what, this is
Hmm.
good enough. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. And that was born out of my own trauma. Perfectionism is one way that trauma can show up. And I was like, oh, this is born out of, this stuff from my childhood. So all of these things have sort of, helped me come to this place where I want to be able to share my success in the ways that I did things with other, clients, coaching clients who are interested in also building a solo line practice. So that's how I got it. That's really how I got into coaching, because I know what a solo and scary journey it can be, as so many of us who are listening know as well.
Mm. So
Yeah.
awesome. I feel like we could just go on forever.
Yeah.
Myra, the last question that I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Well, based on what we were just talking about, I would say lead with soul, which means lead with joy. If you can find one joyful moment in your, or many joyful moments, or find a way to orient what you're doing as moving your vision ahead, or, moving your cause ahead, that's a way that you can really lead with soul. So that would be the advice that I would give to folks listening, like lead with soul, and find out what leading with soul means to you, because it's going to be different than it is for me or for Joe or for anybody else that might be listening.
So awesome. Well, I
Yeah.
know you have some free gifts for people, an ebook, a quiz. Would love to hear how people can access that, and how can they connect with you if they want to read more about your practice.
Yeah. So my private practice is called Somatic Therapy Partners, and we're located in Denver, Colorado. And so you can always get in touch with me and my team there. And then my coaching business is called More Thriving Therapists.com. And I'm working on that. I'm going to have an ebook for each, but right now we have a resilience quiz they can take if you're interested in learning how your nervous system is functioning, through the Somatic Therapy Partners website. And then I'll be launching more information about books and courses through More Thriving Therapists here in the next month or two.
Awesome. And we'll put links to all that in the show notes as well. Myra, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Wow. Well, if you are an active member of the Practice community, last week was a busy week. We had Level Up Week where we did over 20 webinars. And right now, at the time of this recording, we haven't got all of the giveaways together yet. But if it's anything like our March Level Up Week, we probably gave away $20,000 to $30,000 in giveaways from our different partners, sponsors, from Practice the Practice. So if you attended Level Up Week, thank you so much for taking time to invest in yourself. We had so many awesome webinars, I'm assuming, because I'm recording this months in advance. But looking at the schedule, I know that it will have been a success. I think in March we had 1,700 people that signed up for it. And this year we're doing, or this part of the season, we're working with a marketing team that's doing a lot to get in front of other folks. So I plan on having over 2,000 people sign up for it, and that would be just amazing to connect with all of you. As a reminder, our memberships are open right now. They close later this week. Make sure you head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/membership. Then you can look and see what your phase of practice is and what your goals are. So again, if you're in solo practice, then next level practice is for you. and you're going to get access to our over 60 e-courses. And every month I'm filming 4 hours of new e-courses every single month. In addition, you get our weekly live events in Next Level Practice, our Ask the Experts. You get 2 meetings in a small group where you get to brainstorm with other therapists. Also, you get an accountability partner, and you get discounts on all of our services across the board. If you're growing a group practice, if you're getting that going, we have Group Practice Launch to take you from solo to group. That's a 6-month program, and you get full access to Next Level Practice as well. And then Group Practice Boss is for our group practice bosses. And if that is you, we have 4 meetings a month with that. In addition, you still get access to all that Next Level Practice stuff as well. But those meetings are all around group practice. So different things like growing into a mega group practice, adding multiple locations, figuring out your money and your books and all that. And you get to be around all these other amazing group practice owners. And then our last membership is Audience Building Academy. Audience Building Academy, that is where you are launching passive income, you are launching ebooks, you're launching coaching services, podcasts, all those sorts of things. But we start with the belief that you should never launch your product until you have an audience. And so we walk through month by month, milestone by milestone, over 6 months of how do you build your email course and opt-in? How do you get onto high quality podcasts? How do you tell the stories that resonate with people? How do you host your first webinars and your first summits? How do you get national news and exposure and quotes? So we walk you through that entire audience building process over 6 months. So no matter where you're at in private practice, it could be that very beginning, starting a practice, all the way through, I'm going to see fewer people and I want to build some passive income. We have a membership for you across the board. Again, practiceofthepractice.com/members. Stumbling over my words. That's okay. My coffee just kicked in. practiceofthepractice.com/membership. And we also couldn't do this podcast without our amazing sponsors. Therapy Notes has been a sponsor for so long. If you aren't using Therapy Notes, they are the best electronic health records out there. We have a direct connection with their team. We influence them in saying, hey, people want this change, they want this access. In the middle of the pandemic in March 2020, they didn't have teletherapy, and we let them know that our members really needed that ASAP. And within 2 days, they had their IT team launch it early. They had plans later in the year, but they got it out there. And they will also help you transition from whatever platform you're on now. Use promo code Joe to get 2 months for free. And if you're in one of our memberships, you get 6 months for free of Therapy Notes if you are a new client. Every single phase of private practice has its own unique challenges and its own unique opportunities. Whether you're starting and growing a solo practice, getting a group practice going, whether you're already a group practice boss, or you want to go big and go national with the skills you have, every phase has its challenges. And doing that in community with people and learning from other folks and having that guidance is so important. That's why we have a membership community for every phase of practice. Next Level Practice is for solo practitioners to help you get organized, fill up your practice, and get that solo practice rocking. We have small groups, we have accountability partners, we have live events every single week. And also, if in the first 3 months, in the first 90 days, you're not satisfied, we have a 90-day money-back guarantee. Next, we have Group Practice Launch. Group Practice Launch is a 6-month program specifically for you to launch a group practice. We have weekly meetings with that as well as guided courses, and you get full access to Next Level Practice. And you're guaranteed to hire someone in the first 6 months, or you get to go through it again for free. Next, we have Group Practice Boss. Group Practice Boss is for people that have group practices and want to continue to grow. All those ups and downs of having a group practice, of changing that mindset, being in community with other people, and getting that support from us. We, with that as well, have weekly meetings, and you get to come to Next Level Practice events as well. So that's 8 meetings a month that you could come to live to get extra help. Also, there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. Lastly, we have Audience Building Academy. Audience Building Academy is specifically for people that are ready to level up and go national. Maybe you want to get a traditionally published book, have a podcast, launch some e-products and e-courses and scalable income. Audience Building Academy is specifically for you so that you can level up and go national. We'll walk you through exactly how you go from having a solo or a group practice to going national. We'll help you build your email list, get on podcasts, and really level up. So no matter what your phase is, we have a membership community for you. Over at practiceofthepractice.com/memberships, you can read all about them and sign up. This week and next week are the only weeks that they all are open until 2024, so you're not going to want to miss this. Go in there and decide which membership phase is for you and join today. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/memberships. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.